Summer 1975. The Welsh countryside stretches endlessly beyond the windows of Rockfield Studio, its rolling green hills a stark contrast to the creative storm brewing inside. The air carries the scent of hay and possibility, but within these converted farm buildings, something revolutionary is about to unfold. Freddie Mercury stands in the control room, his 25-year-old frame vibrating with an energy that seems to charge the very atmosphere. His dark eyes hold secrets, and in his hands rests a cassette tape that will change everything. The other members of Queen have gathered at his urgent request. Brian May sits forward in his chair, his distinctive curls catching the afternoon light streaming through the studio windows. His red guitar rests against the wall like a faithful companion, having already contributed countless hours to their musical journey. Roger Taylor drums his fingers against his knee in an unconscious rhythm, his blonde hair perfectly tousled, blue eyes curious but slightly skeptical. John Deacon, ever the quiet observer, leans back with arms crossed, his bass guitar nearby, his expression unreadable but attentive. Freddie had called them together with unusual intensity. For weeks, he had been consumed by something, disappearing for hours at a time, muttering melodies under his breath, scribbling notes on any available surface. His bandmates had grown accustomed to his creative obsessions, but this felt different. This felt monumental. The urgency in his voice when he summoned them suggested they were about to witness something that would defy categorization. The studio itself seems to hold its breath. Rockfield has already hosted legends, its walls absorbing the creative energy of countless artists who have passed through its doors. But today, the atmosphere crackles with anticipation, unlike anything the space has experienced before. The mixing desk gleams under the studio lights, its countless knobs and sliders waiting to channel whatever Freddie is about to unleash upon his unsuspecting bandmates. Freddie moves with the graceful confidence that would later become his trademark, but today there is something vulnerable in his movements. He handles the cassette tape with reverence, as if it contains something precious beyond measure. His fingers trace its edges while he speaks to his bandmates about the vision that has been consuming him. This is not just another song, he explains. This is something that has been building inside him like a musical storm demanding to be born. The weight of the moment settles over the four young men. They are already established as a formidable creative force, but success in the music industry remains elusive. Their previous albums have shown flashes of brilliance, but commercial breakthrough continues to dance just beyond their reach. Each of them carries dreams larger than their current circumstances, and they sense that whatever Freddie is about to play could change their trajectory forever. Brian adjusts his position, his scientist's mind already analyzing the potential of what they are about to hear. Roger's drumming fingers still, his performer's instincts recognizing that this moment requires complete attention. John's quiet presence anchors the group, his musical intuition already sensing that the ordinary rules of songwriting are about to be challenged. Freddie looks at each of his bandmates, seeing not just collaborators, but brothers in artistic ambition. The cassette player sits ready, its mechanical heart prepared to release whatever musical creature Freddie has captured within its magnetic tape. The summer afternoon light creates long shadows across the studio floor, marking time before everything changes. Outside, the Welsh countryside continues its eternal rhythm, unaware that within these walls, four young men are about to encounter a piece of music that will outlive them all. This is the moment before revelation, when possibility hangs in the air like incense, and the future waits to be born from the marriage of melody and madness. Freddie's hand hovers over the play button, and history holds its breath. The cassette clicks into motion with mechanical precision, and suddenly the studio fills with piano notes that dance like Mercury across the silence. Freddie's voice enters, tender and questioning, painting images of a young man caught in the crossroads of morality and consequence. The opening verse flows like a confession, intimate and immediate, drawing the three listeners into a narrative that feels both personal and universal. But then the music shifts, and everything the bandmates think they know about songwriting begins to crumble. The gentle ballad transforms into something operatic, with Freddie's voice multiplying into a choir of angels and demons. Brian's eyes widen as he recognizes the complexity of what they are hearing. This is not a song in any traditional sense, but rather a musical novel compressed into 6 revolutionary minutes. Roger's mouth falls open as the operatic section builds to impossible heights, voices weaving together in harmonies that seem to defy the laws of physics. The names Scaramouche, Galileo, and Figaro tumble through the air like characters from a fever dream, each syllable precisely placed, yet feeling spontaneous and alive. John leans forward, his bassist's ear trying to follow the intricate changes that flow like quicksilver beneath the vocal acrobatics. Then comes the thunderclap transformation that no one sees coming. The delicate opera explodes into a rock anthem of such power that it seems to shake the very foundations of Rockfield Studio. Driving guitars and pounding rhythms tear through the air, Freddie's voice, now a weapon of pure emotion, raging against betrayal and demanding justice. The shift is so sudden, so complete, that it leaves the three bandmates stunned into silence. Brian recognizes his own guitar work woven throughout the tapestry, but hearing it in context reveals layers he had not fully comprehended during the recording sessions. Each note serves the greater narrative, building bridges between musical worlds that have never been connected before. The technical complexity is staggering, yet it never feels academic or cold. Every flourish serves the emotion, every harmony deepens the story. Roger hears rhythmic patterns that challenge everything he knows about rock drumming. The song demands precision and power in equal measure, requiring him to be both conductor and soldier in Freddie's musical army. The transitions require split-second timing, yet they must feel effortless and natural. It is a drummer's nightmare and a drummer's dream simultaneously. John processes the bass lines that anchor this musical storm, recognizing how his instrument provides the foundation that allows such ambitious experimentation to remain grounded. The song requires him to be melodic during the ballad sections, supportive during the opera, and aggressive during the rock anthem, all while maintaining the thread that holds the entire composition together. As the final notes fade back into gentle piano and Freddie's voice returns to its original vulnerability, the studio falls into absolute silence. The three bandmates sit frozen, their minds struggling to process what they have just experienced. Nothing in their musical education has prepared them for this. No song they have ever heard has attempted anything remotely similar. The silence stretches for what feels like hours, but lasts only seconds. 3 pairs of eyes stare at Freddie, searching his face for confirmation that what they have just heard is real. The cassette player continues its mechanical turning, now playing only empty tape, but the echoes of those 6 minutes seem to reverberate through the studio walls like ghosts refusing to be dismissed. Freddie stands perfectly still, watching his bandmates' faces for any sign of their reaction. His own expression reveals nothing, but his hands tremble slightly, betraying the vulnerability beneath his confident exterior. He has just shared the deepest corners of his creative soul, and now he waits for judgment from the 3 people whose opinions matter most in his artistic universe. The weight of what they have just heard settles over the room like a physical presence, demanding acknowledgement and response. Brian May is the first to break the sacred silence, his voice barely above a whisper as he struggles to find words adequate to the moment. His scientist's mind races through the implications of what they have just experienced, while his musician's heart pounds with recognition that they have just encountered something that transcends every category of popular music. The song is 6 minutes long, he observes, his practical nature grasping onto concrete details while his imagination reels from the artistic possibilities. 6 minutes is an eternity in the world of radio play, where 3-minute songs struggle for airtime and anything longer risks immediate dismissal. The music industry operates on rigid formulas, and what they have just heard obliterates every single rule. Roger Taylor finds his voice next, his words tumbling out in a mixture of awe and concern. The operatic section alone defies everything they know about rock music, he points out, his drummer's instincts recognizing the technical challenges that such ambitious composition will demand. How do they perform something like this live? How do they explain it to record executives who think in terms of market demographics and radio-friendly formats? John Deacon's response comes in characteristic understatement, but his quiet observation carries profound weight. This is not just a song, he notes, but a complete musical statement that encompasses multiple genres, emotional territories, and technical approaches. It is simultaneously the most ambitious thing they have ever attempted and the most personal thing Freddie has ever shared with them. The three bandmates exchange glances, each recognizing the same mixture of excitement and terror in the other's eyes. They are being offered the chance to participate in something revolutionary, but revolution comes with risks that could either elevate them to legendary status or destroy their... The Welsh countryside stretches endlessly beyond the stone walls of Rockfield Studios, autumn mist clinging to ancient hills like whispered secrets. Inside this converted farmhouse, the air thrums with creative electricity. It's October 1975, and Queen has commandeered the residential facility for what would become their most ambitious recording session yet. The band members have been living here for weeks, sleeping in the studio's rustic accommodations, eating meals together, breathing music morning, noon, and night. Freddie Mercury stands before an old upright piano in the control room, his fingers dancing across yellowed keys with the precision of a master craftsman. His dark eyes hold that familiar gleam of artistic obsession, the look of a man who has glimpsed something extraordinary in his mind's eye and refuses to let it slip away. For months, he has been carrying fragments of melodies, scraps of lyrics, operatic flourishes that seem to belong to different songs entirely. Tonight, he will reveal what happens when those fragments fuse into something unprecedented. The studio feels different tonight. There's an expectancy in the air, thick as the cigarette smoke that perpetually clouds the room. Brian May sits cross-legged on the floor, his beloved red special guitar resting against his knee, curls framing his thoughtful face. Roger Taylor perches behind his kit, drumsticks twirling between restless fingers, while John Deacon occupies his usual quiet corner, bass guitar within arm's reach, watching everything with those penetrating eyes that miss nothing. Freddie has been secretive about this new composition, dropping hints like breadcrumbs, speaking in cryptic phrases about operatic sections and rock crescendos, about something that would challenge everything the music industry thought it knew about commercial viability. His bandmates have learned to trust his instincts, even when those instincts lead them into uncharted territory. After all, this is the man who convinced them to embrace theatrical grandeur when everyone else was pursuing stripped-down authenticity. The tape machine sits ready, its reels catching the studio's amber lighting like golden eyes. Producer Roy Thomas Baker adjusts levels with the meticulous care of a surgeon preparing for a delicate operation. He's worked with Queen before, witnessed their evolution from promising newcomers to established artists. But tonight feels different. Tonight carries the weight of artistic revolution. Freddie's hands hover over the piano keys, trembling slightly with anticipation. This isn't just another song he's about to unveil. This is 6 minutes of musical architecture that defies every convention, breaks every rule, challenges every assumption about what popular music can be. He's crafted something that begins as a confessional ballad, transforms into a mock operatic fantasia, erupts into driving hard rock, then dissolves into gentle resolution. It's ambitious beyond reason, uncommercial by industry standards, and absolutely necessary for his artistic soul. The decision to record at Rockfield wasn't accidental. This isolated sanctuary, where Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath had crafted their masterpieces, offers something invaluable: freedom from external pressure. Here, surrounded by rolling hills and ancient stones, Queen can explore their most experimental impulses without record executives hovering, without radio programmers dictating format restrictions. Here, artistic vision can flourish uncompromised. Brian shifts position, guitar neck catching the light. Roger's drumsticks fall silent. John's fingers pause on his bass strings. They've seen Freddie in creative fugue states before, but this feels monumental. The way he's approached this session, the secretive rehearsals, the careful construction of something they've only heard in fragments, suggests they're about to witness the birth of something extraordinary. The studio clock reads midnight. Outside, Welsh winds whisper through bare branches, carrying stories of ancient bards and forgotten songs. Inside, 4 young men stand on the precipice of creating something that will outlive them all. Freddie's finger hovers over the play button, and in that suspended moment, the future of rock music hangs in perfect balance. Years later, they would remember this night as the moment everything changed, not just for Queen, but for the very definition of what popular music could achieve. 6 minutes of unprecedented artistry waits in that machine, ready to challenge, confound, and ultimately transform everything they thought they knew about their craft. Freddie presses play, and the room fills with magic disguised as rebellion. The opening notes drift from the speakers like autumn leaves falling through still air. Freddie's voice, vulnerable and confessional, begins the story of a young man's darkest moment. The piano accompaniment is deceptively simple, each chord chosen with surgical precision to support the emotional weight of the lyrics. Brian's eyes widen slightly as he recognizes the sophistication beneath the apparent simplicity. This isn't just another love song or rock anthem. This is musical theater condensed into popular song format. Roger leans forward unconsciously, drumsticks forgotten in his hands. The production quality is stunning, even in demo form. Every vocal nuance, every harmonic subtlety has been captured with crystalline clarity. Freddie's voice carries the full weight of human vulnerability, confessing to murder, pleading for understanding, accepting inevitable consequences. The emotional honesty is breathtaking, delivered with the kind of vocal control that separates true artists from mere performers. John's analytical mind begins processing the harmonic structure, recognizing the sophisticated chord progressions that will become the song's backbone. This isn't simple 3-chord rock progression. This is complex musical architecture built with the same attention to detail that classical composers brought to their symphonies. Yet somehow, it never feels academic or cold. The emotion blazes through every note, authentic and raw. The ballad section builds slowly, Freddie's multi-tracked vocals creating a choir of conscience, harmonies weaving together like guilty whispers. Then, without warning, the music shifts. What emerges next defies every expectation, every assumption about what rock music should be. Operatic voices begin their elaborate dance, a mock-serious farce that somehow deepens the song's emotional impact rather than diminishing it. Brian's jaw begins to slacken as he processes what he's hearing. The operatic section unfolds like a fever dream, complete with references to commedia dell'arte characters, rapid-fire vocal gymnastics that showcase Freddie's incredible range, and production techniques that push studio technology to its absolute limits. Galileo, Figaro, Beelzebub, and Bismillah dance through the speakers in a whirlwind of controlled chaos that should be ridiculous but instead feels revolutionary. The tape machine continues its relentless progression, carrying them deeper into uncharted musical territory. Roger's drumsticks hang motionless in his hands as he realizes the technical challenges this composition will demand. The rhythmic complexity alone requires precision that pushes beyond anything they've attempted before. Yet the musical risks feel necessary, inevitable, as if this song always existed and they're simply discovering it rather than creating it. Producer Roy Thomas Baker watches his meters dance, recognizing immediately that this composition demands every ounce of studio sophistication at their disposal. The multi-tracking requirements alone will push their 16-track machine to its limits. The vocal arrangements require mathematical precision in their layering. The dynamic range spans from intimate whisper to operatic grandeur to crushing rock power. It's an engineer's nightmare and an artist's dream simultaneously. John's eyes remain fixed on the speakers, his musician's ear parsing the intricate arrangements that bind these disparate sections into coherent whole. The bass lines that will need to anchor this musical earthquake, the rhythmic foundation that must remain solid while everything else shifts and transforms around it. He's already beginning to hear how his contribution will weave through Freddie's vision, providing the steady heartbeat beneath the controlled madness. The operatic section builds to its climactic peak, voices layering upon voices until the studio fills with a choir of Freddie's. Each vocal line precisely placed, each harmony calculated for maximum emotional impact. Then, like lightning splitting darkness, the music explodes into hard rock territory. The shift is jarring, violent, perfectly timed to maximize dramatic impact. Driving guitars, pounding drums, and Freddie's voice transformed from operatic crooner to rock warrior. Brian's hands unconsciously move to his guitar as he visualizes the solos he'll need to craft, the harmonic support required to match the vocal arrangement's sophistication. The guitar work demands both technical precision and emotional authenticity, supporting Freddie's theatrical vision while maintaining the raw power that defines Queen's sound. It's a balancing act that requires every skill they've developed as musicians. The rock section drives forward with relentless energy, but even here, sophistication lurks beneath the surface. The chord progressions remain complex, the rhythmic patterns intricate, the production values pristine. This isn't simple headbanging music, this is intellectual heavy rock, crafted with the same attention to detail as the operatic passages that preceded it. Then, as suddenly as it began, the storm subsides. The music settles into a gentle coda, Freddie's voice returning to the vulnerable intimacy of the opening, but now tinged with resignation and acceptance. The piano returns, simple chords providing resolution to the musical and emotional journey. The final notes fade into silence, leaving the studio suspendee. The silence stretched across Rockfield Studios like a held breath, thick with possibility and terror. Freddie Mercury sat at the grand piano, his fingers still ghosting over the keys where the final notes of something unprecedented had just died away. Around him, his three bandmates remained frozen in their chairs, their faces a canvas of emotions too complex for immediate words. The 6-minute demonstration tape had finished playing, but its echoes seemed to linger in the wood-paneled walls of the Welsh countryside studio as if the very room was trying to process what it had just witnessed. This was not how songs were supposed to work. This was not how music was supposed to unfold. What Freddie had just played for them defied every convention of popular music, every rule of radio play, every expectation of what a rock band should create. It moved like a living thing through genres and moods, building from intimate piano ballad to operatic theater to thunderous rock anthem, each section flowing into the next with a logic that felt both inevitable and impossible. Brian May was the first to shift in his seat, his guitarist's mind already racing through the technical challenges of what they had just heard. The operatic section alone would require vocal arrangements, unlike anything they had attempted, harmonies stacked upon harmonies in a complexity that pushed against the very limits of what four voices could achieve. His fingers unconsciously moved as if playing air guitar, working through the intricate passages Freddie had sketched out, feeling the weight of expectation settling on his shoulders like a familiar but heavier coat. John Deacon, ever the practical one, found his bass player's instincts analyzing the song's structure, its peaks and valleys, the way it demanded everything from its performers and its listeners. He could already envision the arguments with record executives, the raised eyebrows of radio programmers, the blank stares of music journalists trying to categorize something that refused all categories. Yet beneath his practical concerns lay a growing recognition that they were in the presence of something extraordinary, something that might just be worth every battle they would have to fight. Roger Taylor's drumsticks had been unconsciously tapping against his thigh throughout the playback, his body already responding to rhythms that shifted and evolved with each section. As the band's most commercially minded member, he understood perhaps better than the others what Freddie was asking them to risk. Radio stations built their playlists around 3-minute songs that fit neatly between advertisements. Record labels invested in singles that could climb charts with predictable hooks and familiar structures. This was neither predictable nor familiar, and certainly not 3 minutes. Freddie himself remained at the piano bench, his posture betraying none of the vulnerability he felt in this moment. For months, this composition had lived only in his mind and in scattered notes across countless scraps of paper. He had pieced it together like a musical jigsaw puzzle, each section representing a different facet of human experience, from the intimate confession of personal failure to the grandiose theatricality of operatic drama, culminating in the defiant assertion of rock and roll power. To share it now, to make it real in the ears of others, felt like exposing the most private corners of his artistic soul. The demonstration tape had been his attempt to translate the symphony in his head into something his bandmates could understand, but he knew it was only a shadow of what the song could become with their full creative investment. Each of them brought irreplaceable elements to Queen's sound, and this song would need every ounce of their individual brilliance working in harmony. Brian's guitar wizardry would need to match the operatic grandeur. John's bass would provide the foundation for the song's structural audacity. Roger's percussion would drive the emotional transitions that made the whole thing work. But first, they would need to believe in it as completely as he did. And in this moment of suspended silence, that belief felt far from certain. Freddie could read the calculations happening behind their eyes, the mental mathematics of commercial viability warring against artistic ambition. He had lived with this song for so long that its unconventional structure felt natural to him, but he was asking them to abandon everything they knew about how songs should work, to trust in a vision that existed nowhere else in popular music. The weight of their potential rejection pressed against his chest like a physical thing. This was more than just another song to add to their repertoire. This was a statement about what Queen could be, what rock music could become, what they were willing to risk in service of something genuinely new. If they said no, if they deemed it too strange, too long, too uncommercial, he would respect their decision. but part of him would also die. The part that believed music could transcend its commercial constraints to become something approaching art. Reality was beginning to creep into the room like cold air under a door, bringing with it all the practical considerations that threatened to crush artistic dreams before they could fully take flight. Roger was the first to break the sacred silence, his words cutting through the tension with characteristic directness. "Freddie, it's brilliant." The pause that followed those three words stretched like an eternity, filled with the unspoken conjunction that would determine everything. But it's 6 minutes long. The statement landed in the room with the weight of commercial reality, each word carrying the accumulated wisdom of an industry that measured success in radio-friendly increments and predictable market responses. The brilliance Roger acknowledged was undeniable, even in this rough demonstration form. They could all hear the potential greatness embedded in every section, the way Freddie had managed to create something that felt both completely original and somehow inevitable. But the length was a commercial death sentence in an industry built around the 3-minute single, the format that fit between commercial breaks and satisfied the attention spans that radio programmers assumed their audiences possessed. Brian found himself nodding slowly, his mind already working through the implications of what Roger had articulated. Radio stations programmed their playlists with mathematical precision, balancing advertising revenue with listener engagement, and a 6-minute song disrupted that careful equation. Program directors would take one look at the timing and reject it without even listening to the content. The length alone would prevent it from receiving the airplay that transformed good songs into hits, and hits into cultural phenomena. The operatic section presented its own set of challenges that Brian felt compelled to voice, even as he recognized the creative audacity of what Freddie had conceived. Will audiences even understand it? The question emerged not from any lack of faith in their listeners' intelligence, but from a realistic assessment of how radical a departure this represented from anything currently existing in popular music. The operatic elements weren't merely decorative, they were integral to the song's emotional architecture, but they required a level of cultural literacy that extended far beyond the typical rock audience. Brian's concern stemmed from his deep knowledge of music history and theory, his understanding of how classical and popular forms had traditionally remained in separate worlds. Opera belonged to conservatories and opera houses, spaces defined by formal tradition and cultural exclusivity. Rock music thrived in clubs and arenas, spaces defined by accessibility and emotional directness. Freddie's composition demanded that audiences navigate both worlds simultaneously, accepting operatic grandeur as a natural extension of rock expression. Freddie remained seated at the piano, his hands folded in his lap, watching as doubt crept across the faces of the three men whose creative partnership had already carried them further than any of them had initially dared to dream. Each concern they raised was valid, each practical consideration grounded in industry reality. They were not wrong to worry about commercial viability, radio play, audience comprehension. They were professional musicians whose livelihoods depended on their ability to create music that could find its audience and sustain their careers. Yet Freddie also understood that every truly revolutionary piece of art had faced identical obstacles, identical doubts about market acceptance and audience readiness. The greatest advances in popular music had always required someone willing to risk commercial failure in service of artistic vision. Elvis had been too raw for polite society. The Beatles had been too experimental for traditional pop sensibilities. Bob Dylan had been too literary for folk purists and too folk for rock audiences. Each breakthrough had demanded that artists and audiences grow together, expanding the boundaries of what popular music could contain. The weight of his vision felt heavier now that it existed outside his own imagination, now that it required other people's belief and investment. For months, he had carried this song alone, nurturing it through its various stages of development, protecting it from the critical voices that might have stunted its growth. But collaboration required vulnerability, required exposing his creative instincts to the judgment of others, even others he trusted implicitly. John's silence was perhaps the most telling response, his practical nature working through scenarios and possibilities with characteristic thoroughness. As the band's financial conscience, he understood better than anyone what they would be risking by pursuing something so uncommercial. Their recent success had provided them with opportunities and resources they had never possessed before, but it had also raised the stakes of failure. A commercial disaster could set back their career trajectory by years, could limit their access to the studio time and promotional support that ambitious projects required. The room felt charged with potential energy, as if the very air was waiting for someone to make the decisive statement that would determine not just the fate of this particular song, but the direction of Queen's artistic evolution. They stood at a crossroads between commercial safety and creative risk, between the proven formulas that had brought them success and the unknown territories that, in the summer of 1975, nestled deep within the Welsh countryside, Rockfield Studios stood like a fortress of creativity surrounded by rolling green hills and ancient stone walls. The converted farmhouse had witnessed the birth of countless musical legends, but nothing could have prepared its weathered walls for what was about to unfold. 4 young men from London had arrived with dreams burning in their hearts and a sound that defied every convention of their time. They called themselves Queen, and they were about to discover that sometimes the most extraordinary moments arrive disguised as ordinary afternoons. Freddie Mercury sat at the worn Steinway piano in the main recording room, his fingers dancing across keys that had been touched by musical giants before him. The afternoon light filtered through dusty windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor where his 3 bandmates waited in anticipation. Brian May stood with his red special guitar cradled in his arms, Roger Taylor perched behind his drum kit, and John Deacon leaned against the wall with his bass guitar at his side. They had come to Wales to record their 4th album, but none of them could have imagined they were about to witness the birth of something that would transcend music itself. The silence in the room was thick with expectation as Freddie cleared his throat and looked up at his friends with eyes that sparkled with mysterious excitement. He had been working on something in secret, something he claimed would change everything they thought they knew about what a song could be. His bandmates exchanged glances, familiar with Freddie's theatrical tendencies, but trusting in his genius nonetheless. What they were about to hear would challenge every rule of radio, every expectation of their record label, and every boundary that had been placed on popular music. Freddie's voice began soft and contemplative, barely above a whisper, as he sang the opening lines of what would become the most iconic song in rock history. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, his voice carrying a vulnerability that seemed to float on the summer air like a prayer. But as the song progressed, something magical began to happen. The gentle ballad transformed into an operatic masterpiece, complete with multiple vocal harmonies that seemed to echo from another dimension entirely. His voice soared through impossible ranges, creating characters and narratives that painted vivid scenes in the minds of his spellbound audience. Brian May was the first to recognize the magnitude of what he was witnessing. As Freddie's voice climbed to celestial heights during the operatic section, Brian's eyes widened with a mixture of awe and disbelief. He had known Freddie was gifted, but this was something beyond talent. This was pure artistry unleashed, a creative force that seemed to channel the very essence of human emotion and transform it into something transcendent. Roger Taylor found himself leaning forward, His drummer's instincts recognizing the complex rhythmic patterns that would challenge conventional song structure in ways no one had dared attempt before. John Deacon, usually the quietest member of the group, felt his pulse quicken as he absorbed the intricate musical arrangements that Freddie was describing between vocal passages. This was not just a song, it was an entire musical journey compressed into 6 minutes of pure imagination. The bass lines he was envisioning would need to support not just one musical style, but multiple genres seamlessly woven together like threads in an impossible tapestry. As Freddie reached the thunderous rock section that would become legendary, John realized they were no longer just musicians in a recording studio. They had become witnesses to the birth of something that would outlive them all. When the final notes faded into the Welsh countryside silence, the four young men sat in stunned contemplation. The weight of what they had just experienced hung in the air like incense in a cathedral. This was not the kind of music that played on radio stations. This was not the 3-minute pop song that record executives demanded. This was something entirely new, a piece of art that refused to be categorized or contained within the boundaries of commercial expectation. And in that moment of profound silence, they all understood that they stood at a crossroads that would define not just their careers, but their very souls as artists. The business side of their minds began to race with concerns and complications. Radio stations had rigid formats that demanded songs under 4 minutes. Record labels wanted predictable hits that could be easily marketed to specific demographics. Music journalists would struggle to find words to describe something that had never existed before. Their management would worry about commercial viability, and their fans might be confused by such a dramatic departure from their established sound. Every rational consideration pointed toward the safe choice, the conventional path that promised commercial success and industry approval. But as they looked at each other across that sunlit room in the Welsh countryside, something deeper than rational consideration began to take hold. Brian May was the first to break the silence, his voice carrying the weight of artistic conviction as he declared his unwavering support for Freddie's vision. He understood that true artistry required courage, the willingness to risk everything for the sake of creating something that had never been heard before. If they were going to fail, he reasoned, they should fail while attempting something extraordinary rather than succeed by playing it safe and compromising their creative integrity. Roger Taylor found himself nodding in agreement, his rebellious spirit ignited by the prospect of challenging every convention that had been imposed upon popular music. He had always been drawn to the unconventional, and something about this 6-minute opus spoke to his desire to push boundaries and refuse the limitations that others tried to place on their artistic expression. The very idea of record executives telling them their creation was too long, too complex, or too different only strengthened his resolve to fight for what they believed in. This was about more than just one song. It was about the fundamental right of artists to create without compromise. John Deacon, despite his usual reserve, felt a quiet fire burning within his chest as he contemplated the significance of this moment. Throughout his life, he had observed the music industry's tendency to reduce art to mere commerce, to transform genuine creative expression into manufactured products designed to maximize profit rather than touch human hearts. But what Freddie had just shared with them was something pure and uncompromising, a piece of music that existed for its own sake rather than to satisfy market research or demographic studies. His support came not from words, but from the determined set of his jaw and the steady resolve in his eyes. The decision crystallized in that moment with the power of divine revelation. They would fight the record label executives who would undoubtedly pressure them to edit the song down to radio-friendly length. They would challenge the radio programmers who insisted that listeners had short attention spans and wouldn't sit through 6 minutes of complex musical storytelling. They would stand firm against every music journalist who would call their creation pretentious or uncommercial. This was no longer just about recording an album. It had become a battle for artistic freedom itself, a declaration that true art cannot and will not be compromised for the sake of conventional wisdom. As the afternoon sun began to cast longer shadows across the Welsh countryside, the four members of Queen made a pact that would echo through music history. They understood that what they were about to attempt would require not just musical skill, but tremendous courage and unwavering solidarity. The music industry was a machine designed to grind down individual creativity in favor of predictable formulas, but they were about to throw themselves directly into its gears in defense of something they believed transcended commerce entirely. The weight of their decision settled over them like a sacred oath as they realized they were no longer just musicians trying to make a living. They had become guardians of artistic integrity, protectors of the idea that music could be more than entertainment, that it could be art in its purest and most uncompromising form. Their unanimous agreement to fight for this 6-minute masterpiece was simultaneously an act of rebellion and an act of faith, a belief that audiences were hungry for something more meaningful than the manufactured products that dominated the airwaves. In years to come, music historians would look back on this moment in a converted Welsh farmhouse as one of the most significant in popular music history. But for Freddie Mercury, Brian May, Roger Taylor, and John Deacon, it was simply an afternoon when four friends chose courage over comfort, artistry over commerce, and vision over the safe path that others had laid out before them. They had heard something that would outlive them all, and they were willing to risk everything to bring it to the world. The silence in Rockfield Studio carries the weight of eternity. 5 o'clock on an October afternoon in 1975, and the Welsh countryside bathes everything in that particular golden light that seems to slow time itself. Inside Studio 2, four young men sit frozen in the aftermath of something they cannot yet name. The piano keys still hold the echo of the final chord, and Freddie Mercury's hands remain poised above them like a conductor who has just summoned thunder from clear skies. Roger Taylor's drumsticks rest motionless in his lap. Brian May's fingers hover over his guitar strings, not quite touching them, as if the instrument has become too sacred to disturb. John Deacon sits perfectly still, his bass guitar leaning against the wall, forgotten. They have just heard 6 minutes and 12 seconds that will rewrite the laws of popular music. They have just witnessed the birth of impossibility made manifest. Freddie turns slowly from the piano bench, his dark eyes searching their faces for something he already knows he will find. The demo tape continues to spin silently on the machine behind him, holding within its magnetic particles a revolution that none of them fully comprehend yet. The afternoon light streams through the studio windows, casting long shadows across the mixing desk, across the scattered sheet music, across four faces that have just glimpsed their own immortality. This is not the polished masterpiece that will captivate the world. This is raw, unrefined, a sketch of genius that still needs months of meticulous crafting, but in its bones, in its impossible architecture of opera and rock and pure theatrical audacity, it already contains everything that will make it eternal. The harmonies are there, waiting to be perfected. The crescendos are there, waiting to be unleashed. The madness and the method are there, intertwined like DNA strands of musical destiny. Roger is the first to move, setting his sticks down with deliberate care, as if sudden movements might shatter whatever spell has been cast over the room. His voice, when it comes, is barely above a whisper. The drummer who has thundered through countless performances now speaks like a man in church. He has heard something that transcends the boundaries of what he thought possible in rock music. They all have. Brian shifts in his chair, his curly hair catching the late afternoon light. The guitarist who builds his own instruments, who understands music as both science and art, recognizes the mathematical impossibility of what Freddie has just played. The song defies structure. It breaks rules that have governed popular music for decades. It is three songs disguised as one, or perhaps one song that contains multitudes. In his mind, Brian can already hear the orchestral arrangements, the layers of harmonies that will turn this skeleton into a living, breathing creature of unprecedented beauty. John Deacon, the quiet one, the steady heartbeat of Queen's rhythm section, and sits in contemplation. The bassist, who rarely speaks unless he has something crucial to say, recognizes the weight of this moment. He has just heard a song that will require everything they have learned about music and everything they have yet to discover. The technical challenges alone seem insurmountable, the emotional demands even more so. Yet something in the room tells him they are equal to the task. Something in Freddie's eyes, in the way the melody still hangs in the air like incense, tells him they have no choice but to be equal to it. The song begins with confession, intimate and vulnerable, a man's voice alone, with piano keys in the darkness of remorse. Then it explodes into something unprecedented, a fusion of rock and opera that should be impossible but somehow feels inevitable. The middle section transforms into something that belongs on the stages of La Scala or Covent Garden, complete with mythological characters and dramatic pronouncements that would make Puccini proud. Then it crashes back to earth with a guitar riff that could wake the dead, driving toward a conclusion that feels like both an ending and a beginning. Freddie's voice cuts through their contemplation, not with words, but with a look that encompasses everything they need to know. This is not a song. This is a statement. This is a declaration of independence from every convention that has ever limited their imagination. The record companies will resist it. Radio stations will balk at its length. Music critics will struggle to classify it. But they will record it anyway because something this unprecedented demands to exist. The studio seems smaller now, as if the song has expanded to fill every available space and is still growing. The familiar walls that have witnessed the birth of countless albums suddenly feel like the boundaries of history itself. They are no longer just four musicians working on their next release. They are architects of something that will outlive buildings, outlive governments, outlive the very concept of what popular music can be. Roger reaches for his drumsticks again, not to play but to hold them, to feel their familiar weight while his mind grapples with the unfamiliar territory they're about to explore. The rhythmic challenges alone will push him beyond anything he has attempted. The song demands precision and power in equal measure, restraint and explosion, subtlety and bombast, all woven together in a tapestry that will require months to perfect. Brian's fingers find his guitar strings almost involuntarily, testing chord progressions that might complement what they have just heard. The harmonic possibilities seem endless, each one opening new corridors of musical exploration. The operatic section will require orchestral thinking applied to rock instrumentation. The guitar solo will need to serve the song's dramatic arc while showcasing the instrument's power. Every note will matter. Every choice will echo through generations. John's analytical mind is already calculating the structural complexities they will need to navigate. The song shifts time signatures, changes keys, transforms genres all within the space of 6 minutes. The bass lines will need to provide continuity while adapting to each section's unique demands. It is a bassist's nightmare and dream simultaneously, a chance to prove that the rhythm section can be as adventurous as any lead instrument while maintaining the steady heartbeat that keeps everything from flying apart. The afternoon light continues its slow fade toward evening, but time seems suspended in Studio 2. They exist in a bubble where the normal rules of cause and effect have been temporarily suspended. The world outside continues its familiar rotation, but inside this room, something has shifted permanently. They have crossed a threshold from which there can be no return. The song has claimed them as surely as they have claimed it. Freddie rises from the piano bench, his movement fluid and decisive. There is no hesitation in his posture, no doubt in his expression. He has shown them the map to undiscovered country, and now they must decide whether to make the journey together. The demo tape still spins silently, holding their future in its grooves, waiting for their answer. The silence stretches between them, but it is not empty. It is pregnant with possibility, heavy with the weight of artistic destiny. They can feel the song settling into their consciousness, taking root in their imagination, demanding to be born fully formed into the world. The technical challenges that seemed insurmountable moments ago now feel like mountains waiting to be climbed. The commercial risks that should terrify them feel like prices worth paying for immortality. Roger's eyes meet Brian's across the studio. The drummer and the guitarist share a look that needs no translation. They have followed Freddie's vision through experiments that push the boundaries of rock music, but this feels different. This feels like the culmination of everything they have been building toward since they first played together. The sound they have been searching for without knowing they were searching. The statement they have been preparing to make without understanding its magnitude. John's quiet nod carries the weight of consensus. The bassist who speaks least but hears most has rendered his verdict. The song is not just possible, but necessary. They will find a way to translate Freddie's vision into reality, no matter how many takes it requires, no matter how many layers they must add, no matter how many conventional wisdom barriers they must shatter in the process. The room seems to exhale as decision crystallizes into commitment. They will record this impossible song. They will fight for it when the record company resists. They will defend it when critics attack its ambition. They will nurture it through months of meticulous crafting until it becomes worthy of the vision that Freddie has just shared with them. The demo tape reaches its end and clicks off automatically, but the song continues to play in their minds, each repetition revealing new layers, new possibilities, new challenges to be overcome. They have just heard their own future, and it sounds like nothing that has ever existed before. It sounds like the voice of a generation that refuses to be contained by the boundaries of genre or convention. It sounds like immortality dressed in rock and roll clothing, ready to conquer the world. As twilight settles over the Welsh countryside, 4 young men sit in profound understanding of what they have just committed themselves to creating. They do not yet know that radio stations will initially refuse to play it. They do not yet know that it will become the most beloved song in the history of rock music. They do not yet know that it will inspire countless musicians, comfort millions of listeners, and define the very concept of artistic fearlessness for generations to come. What they know, in this perfect moment of creative clarity, is that they have been chosen to birth something unprecedented. The song has found them worthy of its ambition, and they have found themselves equal